My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. 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 We are continuing our thinking together about freedom and suffering against the background of the distilled insights of the Judeo-Christian faith. So he died for his faith. That's fine. More than most of us do. But can you add to that line that he lived for it too? In his death he bore witness at last as a martyr to truth. Did his life do the same in the past from the days of his youth? It is easy to die. Men have died for a wish or a whim, from bravado or passion or pride. Was it harder for him? But to live, every day to live out all the truth that he dreamt, while his friends met his conduct with doubt and the world with contempt. Was it thus that he plodded ahead, never turning aside? Then we'll talk of the life that he led. Never mind how he died. And then this: it is easy to die mid the world's applause for a noble deed with trumpets blaring. It's the harder part to fight for a cause and inwardly bleed with no one caring. It's easy, perhaps, to die for a dream with banners unfurled and be forgiving It's the harder part to follow the gleam when scorned by the world and go on living. Now, I chose those two because they develop one facet of the thing that is in my heart and mind without my having to take out of my time the energy to do it. You've had one development of an aspect of the idea in the poetry I read, so I won't have to touch that again. Now we'll go on. Last week, in our thinking about suffering, it was suggested that if freedom is fact in man's experience, then suffering must of necessity be a part of that experience of freedom. Of course, if man is not free really, then of course suffering is not a fact really. It was suggested that there is a kind of suffering that belongs to the general category of reward and punishment, of reaping and sowing, of antecedent and consequence, of balance, of a kind of justice, using justice, a working definition of justice as the artificial equalization of unequals, justice in that sense. It was suggested also that there is a suffering that belongs to man's experience as a victim of circumstances over which he is unable to exercise any control, with reference to which he can only abide. The experience of suffering that man goes through as a victim. Now, the degree to which man is a victim in a circumstance may mark, however, the measure of the limitation of his freedom. But we did not have time to develop that aspect of it. It was suggested further that there is a fundamental distinction between man's fate, which may be the experience through which a man passes as a victim of circumstances over which he is unable to exercise any control, but circumstances that are his by virtue of the fact of his existence at a particular time and place and at a given moment in human history. He cannot alter this in terms of the relentless movement of the events themselves. Given then this definition of fate, in what sense may man maintain the dignity of freedom? He may maintain it by brooding over the stubborn and unyielding and recalcitrant aspects of his experience until he is able to make of these experiences something that is more in keeping with his dream and his aspiration and his hope. In other words, a man can determine to a large extent what may be the nature of his destiny, even though he is helpless in the hands of his fate. Now today, I'd like to take this a step further. There is the kind of suffering that no, I'm sorry, that's not right. No. There is an aspect, that's right. There is an aspect of suffering that belongs essentially to man's estimate of himself. Be very patient with me while I try to get at this thing. We must learn how to be worthy of our suffering. That's what I'm trying to get at. Sometimes it seems very clear to me that life deliberately places its hand upon a human being and releases upon that life some of its most violent moods, as if life decided that here is a human being who is worthy of the most powerful diatribes or violences that I can release upon the human being, and if he is worthy of it, there will be revealed in his encounter with the raw elements of the violences reaches of meaning and depth of being that could be revealed in no other way. It's like the seed of the jack pine up in British Columbia. The seed of the jack pine can only sprout, or whatever. Sprout, yes, that's it. The seed of the jack pine can only sprout and develop some little jack pines if it has been burned. All the outer cover burned away. It will lie down under the trees or in the forest. It can rot. It can die. But the only way that it can live, so a ranger in British Columbia told me, is that the seed has to be burned over so that when the forest burns and the jack pines burn, then the seed now is able, for the goody that is in it, to have its chance to live and grow and blossom. Now there may be dimensions of meaning and depth in human life that can only become manifest under this kind of pressure. Now please do not misunderstand me. I am not saying that we should go around trying to find the most terrible things to expose ourselves to them and lay ourselves bare. Just go on attending to your business. Nobody ultimately escapes anyway. Now, when the moving finger touches you, and in that touch, there is the wild manifestation of the unrestrained violences of existence. Don't cry out. Sit with it. Live with it. And get your clue to your own self-estimate from what this thing reveals. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, this is a terrible insight. It has some other ramifications. And I'll just pull in one of them because I can't spend all the time on this. Again and again, an individual has the opportunity to get an estimate of himself from the things that he experiences that try to destroy him. Sometimes I've said to myself, as I have wrestled with some of the violences of human beings, as these violences have been focused on me, for instance, I've said, well, now, there are many things I could do about this. But one thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to see what there is in this that can clue me into the meaning of my own life. And I remember the story of Goliath and David. Do you remember that story? The Philistines on one side, David's people on the other, and they sat and they selected one, the leader of each, to stand out here and fight. It's a wonderful way to have wars. Just select the one able representative and let them fight it out while all the people be the cheering galleries. This would be a very interesting way to handle the wars which we seem to be anxious to have. So here they were. David in a little undershirt with a slingshot and a stone in it. Goliath with his short sword and his long sword, with his headgear, his breastplate, his kneecaps, towering over David. And when Goliath looked at David, and he thought and saw how David was equipped, no shoes, just a little shirt, slingshot. When Goliath realized that this is all David thought of him, he had a stroke. And the only thing David needed to do was to cut his head off at leisure. This is the estimate that life places upon me, that it does not ever place upon my shoulders any burdens greater than I can bear. Life thinks I'm weak. I'm of no account. It does not ask of me anything. Oh, that I might have something to weight me down, that I might measure the height and depths of my being by it. Now, this is what suffering does. This is what it does. If you can be worthy of it, worthy of your pain. Now, there is another aspect of suffering that is crucial. We have been thinking about it almost always, certainly these 2 mornings, in terms of situations and circumstances that are external to us, even though we may be involved in them. But there is a suffering that belongs to the nature of personality. Now let's see. It is a suffering that man can only experience because he's capable of loving. Now this is another kind of suffering. It is one of the dimensions of personality to be able to identify with another person's experience. Now, weigh the words carefully. To identify with another person's experience without at the same time being able to enter into the thing that provoked the experience. Now you have to think carefully with me right here. It is possible for one human being to put himself into another human being and identify with that human being's experience or experiences without at the same time being able to enter into the thing that caused the experience in the other person with whom he's identifying. Now you'll have to take that and chew on it. When you love somebody, you identify with that person's suffering, let us say. You enter into it, even as you remain yourself. But what you cannot enter into is the thing that brought that experience of suffering onto this individual. Here you cannot go. And because you cannot enter into the thing that provoked the experience of suffering, there is on your part a certain sense of impotency, of helplessness. And the measure of your helplessness in being able to enter completely into the suffering of another person marks the measure of the pain that is always inherent in love. For when I love, the logic of the experience is the projection of my personality into the other person's personality utterly and completely. And I can't do it. And the degree to which I can't do it marks the measure of my pain. Haven't you heard a mother say, or a husband or a wife or a friend say, if I could take this off of your shoulders and put it completely on my shoulders, if I could lift the pain which you are bearing, so that you do not have it, and let me take it on. If I could do this, then I would be happy. even if it cost me my life. But you can't do it. And all the time, however, the tutoring of the pain guides you in finding new and fresh ways to approximate it. You become sensitive to little things that you might do to ease the pain here, or to lift a little here. You get fresh insights into the other person's life and meaning, so that you can pick up on wavelengths that flow from them, that of which you were not aware until you entered into the pain. But what you want to do with all of your passionate endeavor is to identify totally, and you can't do it. And this tension between the measure of the meaning of the act that I would perform that would redeem those I love from their pain and their suffering, and what I'm actually and literally able to do about it. This marks the height and depth of my own pain. And it is for this reason, then, that in all of the religions, there is an effort on the part of the religious insight to bridge this gap. So in Hinduism, somewhere along the way, one of the gods actually becomes a man, so that he can enter into the experience and enter into that which provokes the experience. In Christianity, God becomes a man. All of the doctrines of the incarnations, wherever they turn up in the midst of man, striving to find a way by which he can love another human being who is not himself, utterly and completely. All of the doctrines of the incarnations, wherever we find them, undertake to give a rationale for this experience that we cannot have. And every time you find such a doctrine, there is brooding over it a notion that the God who becomes incarnate has to know how to suffer. Because with his suffering, he builds the bridge over which the human race can move in its effort to enter completely and utterly into another human being, while he remains himself. And whether this is really accomplished in any of the faiths of the world depends somewhat upon the degree to which the simplest devotee of the faith feels that he is able to accomplish it. Without suffering, there can be no freedom. Without suffering, there can be no ultimate dignity for the human spirit. Walk beside us, O God, and leave us not alone, even in our experiences of most complete isolation and desolation, that we may not be afraid of life either by day or by night. Our Father,